Hey guys, it's Diana. Welcome back to my channel, and I am standing outside currently. It is snowing. Today I want to talk about some guide dog misconceptions. However, before we get there, Fawn, what are you doing? Fawn is out in the snow. She's doing her zooms. Oh my goodness. Fawn, you're making me dizzy. What is going on? What is all this? We have at least a foot of snow out here. Look at how nuts it is. I can't believe it. Fawn, what are you doing? What's this? What's going on? What? Who's a good girl? Fawn! Hey! You having fun? What's going on, pup? We in the snow? Oh, God. Oh. Oh, I almost fell. Hey, we out in the snow? What's going on? What's all this? Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. What? What's happening? Fawn, my hands are freezing. I kind of want to go inside. What? Do you zooms? Want to run? Let's run. Let's run. Come on. What? All right, now that we're back inside and Fawn is here hanging out with me. Hey, pup. Hey, come here. Good girl. Hi. So now that we're back inside, I would like to talk about some misconceptions that people have about guide dogs. As some of you may know, Fawn is a retired guide dog. I had worked her for about a year and a half, and I had to retire her because she got very distracted by other dogs. And the school that I got her from had worked very hard in trying to help us with dealing with those distractions, and they offered a lot of assistance and training and aftercare, and it's nobody's fault, but I'm glad that I got to keep her as a pet. So I just would like to talk about what I've noticed in my experience working a guide dog and what I've heard from other people who are guide dog handlers, in the sense that what the public thinks about guide dogs and some general misconceptions. Alright, the first thing is that some people seem to think that any dog can be a guide dog or a service animal. Well, that may be true in theory. At least as far as I know, the guide dog schools here in the US have their own breeding programs, so their dogs are bred on their campuses, in their breeding centers. Sometimes some schools will get dogs from other schools if they need a certain breed or whatever, but for the most part, these dogs are bred at those schools so they can keep track of temperament and any medical issues that may be, like, you know, happening within the pairing or whatever. But also, like, these dogs, they're trained basically from the day that they're born. So they stay in the breeding center, at least in the case of Guide Dog Foundation, they stay in the breeding center for, I think, a few weeks or something, or like a month or whatever. I don't know how long, but they stay there for a while. Then they are transported to what is called a puppy raiser or a puppy walker, or like a, you know, a person who volunteers their time for about a year, year and a half or so, and they train the dog. And when I say they train, I mean they teach the dog basic commands like sit, stay, come. They teach the dogs their names, they housebreak them, everything. And they also socialize them to various places and situations and things, like out in the world. So they'll take these dogs to the grocery store, to amusement parks. I think I heard that there was a puppy raising group in Florida who actually would go to Disney every year because one of them was a cast member or something, I don't know. So they take these dogs absolutely everywhere. And because they're service dogs in training, they're covered under the ADA laws for service animals because they're in training. So they are allowed to go on planes, they are allowed to be in malls, they are allowed to go to the doctor's office, etc. The only places that service animals are not allowed is places where like food is directly prepared, like in a kitchen environment, and in ICUs, operating rooms, like sterile environments like that, which is kind of obvious. These dogs are allowed absolutely everywhere. And the training, once they're done with the puppy raiser, they go back to the guide dog school to go through formal guide work training. They're introduced to the harness and things like that. The second thing that I think is another big misconception is that people generally think that service dogs and guide dogs don't have any time off, that they're working 24/7, and that is 100% not true. Fawn wore a harness when she was working, a guide harness, and when she was working, that was it, she was working. The harness signified that it was the start of her work time, and when I took it off, it was the end of her work time. When the harness comes off, and this is true for service animals who wear vests or whatever, or any type of equipment that they associate with work, the dog is a regular dog. So when I would take Fawn's harness off, she could play, other people could socialize with her, she was a regular dog. I mean, like, that's that. These dogs still get the love and affection that are deserved of them, and they get the time to be regular dogs. It's not just working 24/7. They're not robots, they're dogs, they're animals, they're living, breathing beings. So they're working when they're working, and they're not when they're not. Now, I treat Fawn, and I still do obviously because she's my pet now, like, you know, she's part of the family, and I have treated her that way since she was working. She has a bunch of toys, she has like a big comfortable bed, she has, you know, treats. You guys saw the advent calendar. She, you know, I still feed her the same food that she was being fed while we were in training, which is Natural Balance, their Synergy formula. I believe Guide Dog Foundation has switched over to Nature's Select. I don't know what flavor or whatever because that was after my class with her. These dogs do get to be regular dogs. They get to play, they get to sniff, they get to do whatever they do. My friend Lena, for example, she was in my videos from the ACB convention back over the summer, which I'll link that playlist up in the cards and down below. Her guide dog is like best friends with Fawn. So when we would get together when the dogs were working, if I was over her house or if we were somewhere where we could take the dogs off harness and they could play, like they would play. And, you know, they played really well together. They shared toys, you know, they'd play, and then they would stop when they got tired. Some dogs, it's like a person, right? Some dogs have more energy and personality than others. Fawn is definitely quite the character. I'm not gonna lie, she has like a big personality, but she's not super duper hyperactive. She's pretty mellow, and even though she's like 6, she still sometimes has like the energy of a puppy. I guess my main point is that guide dogs, like, they're not working 24/7. They have the time to play. Another thing that people tend to think is that the dog knows where to go, like where you're going and how to cross streets and read traffic signals and, you know, what bus is coming and things like that. These dogs, they're animals. They don't have the capacity to think like humans do. However, they do get used to a routine. So when I was working Fawn, I had her during my last semester of college, and she got to learn where my classes were after like the first day of doing the routes with her. So I could tell her, find class, and she would take me right to the door of my class. That's because we had done the routes a few times, or I had taught her to target it by using clicker training and giving her a piece of kibble whenever she brought me to the doorway of the classroom. You can teach these animals how to find things. Guide Dog Foundation is really big on the find and follow commands, at least they were when I was there. I don't know if things have changed now, but I taught her where Starbucks was, for example. Only one Starbucks location. And she could find a Starbucks for me literally anywhere we were. Like, drop us in the middle of some random mall, I would tell her to find Starbucks, she'd bring me right there. Because, like, I don't know if she knew the scent or whatever the deal was, but she loved finding things and she liked following people. However, they don't know like what the traffic signal is saying or what bus you need to get on. They just know you have to tell them where you're going. You have to have the proper O&M skills and cane training and whatever to be able to know where you're going and where to tell your dog to go. It's a team effort. Yes, they will not let you cross the street if there's oncoming traffic because of intelligent disobedience. However, you also need to know when it's clear to go. You can't just be trying to cross. I mean, they won't let you usually try to cross when there's oncoming traffic, but you also need to have the skills and thinking to be able to cross the street safely without relying solely on your dog to know when to go forward. Getting a guide dog, it requires a lot of training beforehand. You need really good cane skills. You need like recommendations from your orientation and mobility instructor. There are a lot of things that go into applying for a guide dog, at least here in the United States. You know, you need to have an accurate eye report that's up to date. You need to have other references that can speak to you as a character, things like that. But you need to know where you're going. That's why one of the main things that these schools tell their applicants to do is to have a few routes in mind, especially when they have interviews to be accepted into the program. So since I lived at school when I was applying for Fawn, I was able to show the instructor who came to interview me around the campus in various routes that I took to and from class in the various buildings and whatnot. And it, you know, worked out very well in my favor. Other people would do things like that in the community, or they would take public transit or talk about the various things that they did in the day that would attribute to why they needed a guide dog and the amount of work that they were able to provide a guide dog with. Another thing that people think is that you don't need to keep up with your cane skills when you have a guide dog, and that's not true. What if your dog is sick one day, or you have to retire them suddenly, or God forbid something happens? You need to have an alternative method of getting around, because if you can't use your dog, like, what are you gonna do? You need to get to work, you need to get to school, you need to do whatever. You have to have a backup plan. I mean, hell, I hated my cane. You know, I didn't like going back to it after I retired Fawn, but it took a little bit and it was fine. But I had also kept up with my skills using it. I just didn't like using it when I was done working her because I was so used to working her. Working with a cane versus a guide dog is a completely different experience because the dog takes you around obstacles versus the cane, which is a more tactile approach and like you hit things all the time with it. So you'd be walking and the dog would take you around a garbage bin that's in the middle of a sidewalk or a tree or whatever, versus the cane, you'd be whacking that stuff all over the place and be like, what the heck? So that's why it's good to have landmarks. And again, going back to my other point, to know where you're going and what your general routes are. So I don't know, I realize that a lot of this is just me talking at the camera, but I hope that if you previously were not that educated about some misconceptions regarding guide dogs, that maybe you are now. Anyway, today's tea in my Boston Skyline Starbucks mug is the David's Breakfast Blend, which is just like a black tea. Actually, I think I steeped it a little too long because it's really strong. I think it needs some sugar or honey or something because it's just like a your standard black breakfast blend tea. I'm personally not a big fan of it, but it's not the worst thing I've ever had. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back tomorrow with another day of Vlogmas, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!